We will be starting at the top of the ballot.
Okay.
We will be going through ballot order. We will be doing 1-minute answers. I will ask you the question. The person who's at the top of the ballot will answer first. The person who is next then on the ballot will answer second, and we'll continue in that order. We will alternate who answers first, also in ballot order. So the person who is second on the ballot will answer the second question first. So we are going to start with a question of introduce yourself and explain your motivation for running for this office.
All right, good afternoon. It's great to be with you all. My name is Jerry Evans. I'm running for U.S. Congress in the new 11th District, and I'm a husband, I'm a father, an amazing wife, and 2 amazing sons. I'm a small business owner. I founded a music school from scratch as well as own a commercial property, and I believe that leadership is about service, it's about authenticity, it's about sacrifice. And for me, I'm a person of faith, I'm a Christian. And the ideals that Jesus showed us as he walked the earth and lived a life of self-sacrifice, that's how I want to live my life. I believe the life that's worth it is a life that's lived to serve other people and to love God. And so because of that, I'm really not okay with the policies that we're seeing in Washington right now, with the progressivist policies of the Joe Biden administration. And so I'm running to go ahead and stand up, number one, for a free economy and to curb inflation. I actually believe we need to have a constitutional amendment for a balanced budget. I happen to be a 38. I am technically a millennial, and I'm an avid anti-socialist because I believe that socialism is evil and has hurt so many people. Number two, I care tremendously about standing up for free educational choice and choice for parents to go ahead and choose what's right for their children in terms of their education, as well as federal funding following the student. Thirdly, I care tremendously about supporting law enforcement, as well as a host of other things. I'm strongly pro-life. I care tremendously about our Constitution and standing about what our Constitution is supposed to be for, which is about our rights and our freedoms. All that being said, very thankful I've been endorsed by Jeannie Ives, as well as former Chief Justice of the Illinois Supreme Court, Bob Thomas, as well as up here in McHenry County, the current McHenry County Board Chairman Mike Bueller's endorsed my campaign as well. Been very thankful for those endorsements, but ultimately I believe that right now there's a movement happening in America, and it's not about me. My name happens to be on the ballot, but it's actually about you. It's about the amazing people of McHenry County, the people here in Illinois as well as America. And so I want to let you know that I want to fight for you and stand up for the lives of everyday Americans as well as the people here in Illinois. So let's take our country back, and thank you so much.
Hello. I'm a little shorter. My name's Susan Hathaway Altman. I'm also running for U.S. House of Representatives. And I had a real calling during the pandemic to run for the U.S. House. I was sitting at my desk and I just had this feeling that came over me that said that I cannot wait any longer, that I have to stand up and run. So I'm one of those candidates that Tom talked about earlier from the state that has no preconceived notion and is truly grassroots. And I appreciate everyone out there. Thank you for coming. There's a lot of my folks that I've seen at other places that have actually came here today to support me and my wonderful family. I have 3 beautiful daughters. They're all in the audience today. I have a beautiful daughter that's 32. She's adopted from foster care. I have 2 other daughters, 19 and 13. So the reason why I felt this and I felt like the Holy Spirit calling me to do this was, during the pandemic, our freedoms really were overtaken by the biggest smash and grab that there ever was by demagogues that really used our children as pawns through this entire situation. And so I'm here to take your freedoms back. I want to be the one that fights for you to get those freedoms back. I'm just a normal person, but when I evaluated that feeling, because at first I thought, this is crazy, right? No, I can't do this. But I thought, you know what? Our founding fathers did this. Some were farmers, some were others. I have a lot of great skills. Where do my skill sets align? My skill sets really do align with being a U.S. House rep. I have 32 years in corporate America, many of them I've been blessed to work with some of the largest companies in the world, like American Express, where I worked in financial services and the travel industry. And I've been in the travel industry for that entire time. And it's the largest industry in the world and about $2 trillion industry here in America. And I really feel that I'm a perfect fit because some of those, okay. Well, then we'll talk about that later. But all I'll say is I love this country, and I appreciate being here today in the 11th District to have you make that choice.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Carroll, and I'm running for Congress in the 11th District. I'd like to thank McHenry County for inviting us and to participate in this forum today. I'd like to thank Jerry and Susan for showing up today. There's actually 6 candidates in this race, and Jerry and I and Susan have been at 3 candidate forums by ourselves. So keep that in mind when you're making the decision in this race, because this is a serious race for a serious job. And this job requires humility and qualifications. I'm the youngest of 9 kids. I live in North Aurora with my wife and 3 boys. I've been a coach for 15 years in youth sports in North Aurora. I've been involved in my church, school, community. I'm a Hillsdale College graduate. At the end of my Hillsdale College career, I had the honor of working for Chairman Henry Hyde at the House Judiciary Committee right after the Republican Revolution of 1994. And in Washington, I had the experience of working on the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act and the Defense of Marriage Act, parental rights legislation, euthanasia legislation, and lobbying reform. I was an intern for the summer, and then I got hired on for a year as a staff assistant. And I got to understand the legislative process. I'm the only candidate in this race that actually understands how the legislative process works from the beginning of drafting a bill to passing it on the floor of the House. So I will take that experience with me to Washington. I'm an elected trustee in North Aurora. I've been serving in my 2nd term currently as a trustee. I understand what it's like to represent constituents. I've been a practicing attorney in Northern Illinois for 20 years. I understand what it's like to represent clients. So I'm running for Congress, and I'm asking for your vote in this June 28th. Thank you.
Thank you. So I did not mention at the beginning of the candidates, there's a timer right here under the green.
Okay,
So you can see,
do that.
yep, so you guys can see how much time you have left. All right, so the next question will start first with Susan. And it's what do you want to accomplish when elected, and how do you intend to actually make that happen?
Okay. Well, I think I'll answer the second part first. How do I intend to make that happen? Because it really kind of summarizes some of the finer points. So I would say that we have to make it happen really by facts, data, and a lot of persuasion, right? So we can't go into this and say, we're going to have this polarized situation going on in the United States where we're on 2 opposite sides and nobody comes to the middle, because that's exactly what's happening now. I do feel there's going to be a wave of red in November, but we have to keep that in mind, that we have to really work our magic with other members in Congress to have anything be accomplished. So the way I intend to do that is really by a lot of persuasion, collaboration, and really trying to change that culture of the polarization. So some of the things I want to really tactically achieve in Congress. The first one is to return to energy independence. Wait a minute. Time that quick? Is it 30 seconds or is it 1 minute? Okay, I talked for 1 minute. All right. Well, we'll talk about that one later too.
Could you repeat the question, please?
What do you want to accomplish when elected, and how do you intend to actually make that happen?
Thank you. First and foremost, I think one of the most important jobs of a congressman is to represent the people. And for too long, we've elected people that are tone deaf, millionaire politicians that are out of step with what's going on back at home. Bill Foster is a perfect example of that. So one of the first things I would do is I will listen to the people. Secondly, the job of a legislator is to draw people to themselves. They present an idea, a legislation, and you draw people to yourself. I've been working as an attorney in an adversarial process for 20 years. I know how to fight hard for my constituents when it's called for, but I also know it's time to roll up my sleeves, work with the other side, and get things passed so that we can solve problems and move the 11th district forward. Thank you.
Yeah, so what I would say is I think the first thing we needed to do is understand that unfortunately we have a Democrat in the White House right now, and I would go to U.S. Congress to go ahead and put a check on the progressivist policies of the Joe Biden administration. And that's actually a significant thing that needs to be done because we'll have to wait one more cycle until we can go ahead and put a Republican in the White House. And so that's the first thing we would need to do. Is number two, I would care tremendously, just coming from my background in business. I've got a small business with a music school, and one thing I found out is that if you have money, you have money. And if you don't have money, you don't have money. And you have to be honest with the numbers. And I would care tremendously about going to Congress to go ahead and fight for fiscal responsibility in every single way that I can with every single bill that would come across the floor to make sure that we're not continually putting this really, really tough debt on our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Along with that, I would also care tremendously about continuing to fight for school choice and fighting for federal funding, as well as making it as easy as possible for students, especially in poor and middle-class communities, to access private schools and charter schools. Thank you.
All right, and this one will start with you, Jerry. Describe 3 bedrock principles that are most important to you, which will guide every decision you make in your public life.
Yeah, so I alluded to this in my opening statement before, but for me, I'm a person of faith. I'm a Christian. I really care a lot about living my life self-sacrificially, just the same way that Jesus did. Is that my wife and I, we believe that the life that's worth living is the life that where you lay it all out on the field to serve other people, and that's what our goal is. Along with that, I would care tremendously about simply. I know I already mentioned this in the previous question, but I care a lot about just being honest with the facts and honest with the data. So when it comes to fiscal responsibility, we have to be honest with the numbers and find a way to reform our budget so we stop loading up on debt. We have to be honest with the results of certain bills to realize that, hey, you know what? We need to focus on school choice. We need to be honest with what's happening at the southern border, that this unchecked illegal immigration that's happening and all the sex trafficking and all the riches that are being poured into drug cartels are not okay. And so I think just honesty, being truthful, being principled, again, as well as being servant-hearted is very much those principles that I would really care to go after. Thank you.
Okay, so the 3 principles that I definitely think are the best are, first, fiscal responsibility and ethics. And I have very strong personal financials, and I'd like you guys to verify that by looking at my financial disclosure as well as my opponents. I have honesty, and the truth hurts at times. So we're all fallible because we're not perfect, and God will always prevail, but we have to be honest with ourselves and to always stand up for the truth. And courage. Definitely need courage to be in Congress. And going back to the 3 things I want to accomplish when I'm in office, other than energy independence, fix the supply chain. I have the skills most suited to fix this huge issue with many breakpoints. The supply chain problems are a big reason why our economy is down and our inflation is on the rise. And double the military and model of a Cold War, just like we did in the 60s and 70s, because, ladies and gentlemen, we are in a Cold War.
I would view any legislation or any act of Congress through the lens of my personal decision-making process is God, family, country, party. That's how I would decide any question. So God, family, country, party. And I'll tell you this, as the youngest of 9 kids, I learned from an early age how to advocate for myself and to find a voice. As an attorney and as a Hillsdale College grad, what I learned is that the Constitution is paramount. And we need to elect somebody in this race that understands that the Constitution defines exactly what powers should rest in the federal government. For too long, the federal government has stolen our power as the people, stolen our rights, taken away our rights, and there's a belief that our rights are derived from them instead of the opposite. So I believe that we need to adhere to the Constitution.
All right. And I forgot where we're at in the ballot order here.
I haven't gone.
Okay. Oh, you know what? I think I messed that up, but you should have gone first on that last one. But we'll get back on track. All right. So the next question is: as Republicans, we respect all human life and regard all humans as having been created in the image of God. What have you done, and what will you do to protect the rights of all humans, whether unborn, elderly, or undocumented?
Thank you. Thanks for the question. I am profoundly pro-life. I believe that life begins at conception and ends at natural death. In Washington, I worked on the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act. I was the kid that was holding up the pictures on C-SPAN with the graphic photos of what that procedure was. And without going into gross details, it was a procedure that allowed the taking of a human life up to the moment of birth. And I would support a constitutional amendment defining life at beginning at conception and ending at natural death. And I am vehemently in favor of overturning Roe versus Wade. And I believe that the 9th Amendment actually protects the right to life so that when it comes back to the states, any state law that conflicts with the U.S. Constitution should be overturned. Thank you.
Yep. So I really do believe that an unborn child is a person that has a right to live, period. I really do believe that life begins at conception. I'm very, very strongly pro-life. I think I care so much about the reality that we need to go ahead and focus on taking care of the weak and defenseless. And I think what better way to do that than taking care of our unborn? And so because of that, for those of you who know Illinois Right to Life, the sister organization of that organization, Illinois Citizens for Life PAC, has endorsed my candidacy for U.S. Congress here in the 11th District. But I care tremendously about the pro-life movement. Because of that, I had done interviews in the past with people who are pro-life leaders. I had made sure to be at pro-life marches. I actually remember when I was a very young kid, we would go out and be in a pro-life march and holding signs encouraging people to go ahead and keep their children and not abort them. And so it's actually been a lifelong thing that I've cared tremendously about. And I would also very much support the overturning of Roe versus Wade. The Roe versus Wade should have never happened in the first place. And I really hope to see it overturned. Thank you.
I'm really glad that my opponents have come around and said that Roe versus Wade should be overturned and gone back to the states. So I'm glad they're listening. I am a Catholic and I am fully pro-life, and it's horrific what's happening in Illinois right now with abortion. The first thing I would do is I would defund Planned Parenthood. The second thing I would do is I would define what life means federally, and that is a life is from conception to natural death. The 4 things that I have done, because I'm a take action candidate, I have actually done work more than I've talked. I'd love to talk, but I've actually done more work in my campaign than any of my opponents. First thing I've done is formed a not-for-profit business here in Illinois in the 11th District, and it's called feedourbabies.org. And I've been concentrating on baby food drives to protect the newborn babies and toddlers who need food right here in the 11th District. I work with the elderly, the unborn, my parents, and yes, I know I'm done.
So this next question, then we will start with you, Susan. And it's the GOP Pillar on the right to protect yourself and others states that this God-given right enables Americans to exercise their constitutional authority for self-defense to protect their homes, loved ones, and communities. If elected, what will you do to stand up for and protect the rights of gun owners?
The first thing I'd like to say is that I feel horribly bad about what has happened in Uvalde, Texas, and I feel so bad for the family. So I just want to acknowledge that right now, and they have been in my prayers for the last week, and it's a horrible situation. But just like the First Amendment, where they tried to get a ministry of truth in this country, and I lobbied against it. I actually had a press release, and I had a whole action going where I was going to be on the attack to completely remove this ministry of truth. And still they haven't completely removed it, so I'm still on the attack. But just like that, if we do anything with our Second Amendment rights, then we're done. Because then they'll go after our First Amendment. They'll go after every amendment. So we do have to protect our Second Amendment rights. And I'm actually a constitutional carry gal, so that's what I believe in. And we have enough laws in the state of Illinois, but look at what happens. 971 deaths so far this year and 50 shootings over the weekend last weekend. In Chicago.
Thank you. I believe that the Second Amendment is one of the clearest amendments in the Constitution, that the right to bear arms shall not be abridged. The problem is when people talk about gun control, it's not about guns. It's about control. They want to take away guns from law-abiding citizens so that the government stays in power. You have to look at the Second Amendment and the rest of the Constitution, for that matter, in the context of the history when it was written. The Founding Fathers had just come after the Revolutionary War when British soldiers were housed in their houses, and they wanted to make sure that never happened again. So they guaranteed the right to bear arms to prevent and protect us from tyranny, self-defense, and defense of others. So I would vehemently uphold the Constitution, and I would support or I would not support any restrictions on our right to bear arms. Thank you.
I believe that the Second Amendment is essential for a free and safe society. Not only is it fully embedded in our Constitution, it's essential for our Constitution. I'm going to say it again, the Second Amendment is essential for a free and safe society. I really do believe that to stand up against tyranny, we need the Second Amendment to ensure that our government doesn't continue to try to overreach on its rights. But also on top of that, I really do believe it provides safety, especially for people who might be in weaker defenseless situations. What about the mother or the single mother who is in a tough neighborhood and wants to make sure she is just protected? What about some other person who's in a tough neighborhood who wants to protect themselves and defend themselves? I think it's very important, but I fully stand with the Second Amendment. I think it's essential. I think there's a reason why it came just after freedom of speech and religious liberties, is because it's that important. On top of that, for instance, I know this is a state level issue, but I believe the FOID card is unconstitutional. Just to go ahead and show you a little bit more about what I believe about the Second Amendment. So I do stand firmly with the Second Amendment. Thank you.
All right, and then to try and get back on track, we'll start this one with you, Mark. So small government, or government always gets bigger and accordingly more intrusive and controlling over citizens' lives. What is your suggestion on how we can rein in and reduce the size and scope of government?
Thank you. This question is right up my alley. As a graduate of Hillsdale College, I'm a firm believer in the enumerated rights of the Constitution. There is a critical misunderstanding with our representatives in Congress that believe that all government power is derived at the top. I believe that our rights are derived by God, and we come into a social compact and we agree to limit our rights in order to live together in a social compact, and we created the federal government. What I would do to restrict and limit is I would attack and defund the fourth branch of government that is involved in every area of our lives. All three branches of government are complicit in creating this fourth branch of government and pushing all responsibility and all accountability over to this fourth branch. Let them make the tough votes, the tough decisions. So guess what? We can get reelected every 2 years. It's not about serving us. It's about the next election. So attack the fourth branch of government and bring the power back to the states and the local governments.
I think I would have a couple main things to say on this question. And so first off, again, coming from my small business background, if for some reason a small business was in debt, you have to find a way to make some smart cuts to go ahead and get out of debt. And America, unfortunately, is in debt because of overspending or improper spending. And so I remember there was one time there was a story of a leader in a state who just simply went to the departments and said, give me a budget that's about 9/10 of what you have right now. And it was challenging. It wasn't easy. It didn't involve a trigonometric equation. It didn't involve something very complicated. It just involved making some tough choices to go ahead and make wise decisions financially. So I would care about finding ways to go ahead and be smart with our spending and pull back everywhere we can to go ahead and minimize but turn around the federal debt we have. On top of that, in the Constitution, in our first 3 articles, we have the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. And you know what? There is no 4th branch. There is no administrative state. And right now, the administrative state has taken up so much power away from people. We need to get back to the legislators making the laws. Thank you so much.
I'll speak to this from a federal level, but just to make a quick comment, there's a lot of overlap in the state and local governments in Illinois. From the federal level, we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. So there are many ways that we can rein in the spending. I talked a little bit before about why it was so important that I had great personal financials. It's because I'll take that power of the purse from the U.S. House of Representatives that's bestowed on me, and I will treat it the same way that I treat my purse in my household for you. So the first thing I would do is I would completely defund and deregulate and get rid of the Department of Education because it's not an enumerated right. The next thing I would do is do a 10% reduction in all departments except for those that are anything with programs that relate to Medicaid, Medicare, and the aged or the veterans. I'd pull back the $1.2 trillion that funds infrastructure.
So I think we've gotten back on track on who's answering first. So we'll be starting back at the top of the ballot again with Jerry. So this question is on education. The education system in Illinois is broken. If we have learned anything from the pandemic, it is that parents need to have a greater say in their child's education. What would you like to see changed to improve America's education system?
Yeah, so I come from the background of a teacher as well. With my music school, I've been teaching for approximately 20 years now. And then if you count some swimming lessons when I was in high school, you can probably make that longer. But as a teacher, I would say ultimately it's actually not about me. It's about the students. It's about the parents. And I think that so often when it comes to education, the focus that progressives and Democrats have is their focus is on the unions. And I would say I think we're missing it if we're focusing on the unions. We have to focus on the parents and we have to focus on the students. And so my main focus would be how do we make sure it's as easy as possible for students to get the education that they need and that the parents can have the freedom to go ahead and have their children get the education that they want. If they want to go somewhere to a charter school or particularly to a private school, I really think we need to make sure we're focusing on that. But I think the philosophical focus of making sure we're focusing on the students is important. Again, I've mentioned this before as well, and I know I've mentioned a couple of these points before, but I believe that the funding needs to be following the students. There's so many people in poor and middle-class families that can't afford private education, and I would stand to go ahead and have that funding following those students so that we can have reform in the public education system. Thank you.
As far as education goes, I'd like to acknowledge Susan and thank her for stating that she would abolish the Department of Education. We actually published that in our priorities about 2 months ago. Here's the key to the Department of Education. Everything that we're hearing about our schools right now, critical race theory, sex education of kindergartners, that didn't happen organically at the ground level. That's being directed from Washington. And 10,000 school districts across the country didn't wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to teach my kindergartner about sex education. When the federal government has an agenda to attack God, attack life, attack gender, and attack marriage that's coming down from Washington and it creeps into our schools, it's time to abolish the Department of Education and let the local school districts and the people right here get elected to the local school districts where the real change needs to happen. Thank you.
Are we out of order? No, that's okay. I had that on my website 3 months ago, but that's okay. If we do get rid of the Department of Education, it's $68 billion. So that's a huge piece of it. I'd like the state and local governments to work together to come up with some standards for academic excellence. We need to really begin looking at that because China and Russia have way passed us up on academics. And a lot of the European countries are coming really close. So let's let's think about math, science, things that are very important to us, right? Instead of, having parents not having control of decisions. So let me give you an example. My 13-year-old here can actually get an abortion in Illinois. Okay. She's not even allowed to go over a kid's house without, her mom's telling her it's okay. So that's not okay with me. Our kids are being used as soft targets. So we've got to really give 100% of control back to the parents. Next, on the thank you.
All right, so then this one, we will start with you, Susan. What unique skills or experiences do you have that will be a benefit in this office?
I know I'm going to run out of time on this, so sorry. Okay, so I have 30 plus years in corporate America. I have a great financial background. I have strong financials working in one of the largest financial services corporations on earth, American Express, and for creating contracts and financial programs for our largest customers that were in the Fortune 100. I have a consulting background. I was a leader in business development for both transaction processing and the consulting arm of the business. I did negotiations and contracts working with the GCO and business development and writing contracts and parts and agreements of contracts that included up to 110 countries and their local languages, content, and currencies. I've been in supply chain management the entire time. I've run industry relations and operations early in my career. I was an employee in several departments where we produced and delivered various products to customers. I managed inventory, supply management, ordering, invoicing, supply, logistics, and operational effectiveness. As a leader, I managed very large departments of people, including a 300-person reservation center.
Thank you. First and foremost, as a Hillsdale College grad, I have a unique understanding of the Constitution and the proper scope and size of the federal government. I also, as a practicing attorney, I have been advocating for small businesses and individuals for 15 years in private practice. And these people came to me when they were struggling, and I helped work with them to get them through that struggle. And in the meantime, in the interim, I struggled myself financially because I often would have clients that's paid me sporadically or at the end of the year, and that was a tough way to make a living. But I didn't turn those clients away. They came to me to solve a problem, and I helped them solve problems. And what that did is it taught me humility. Humility is the key to public service because we send so many elected officials to Washington that are not humble. They're successful, millionaire, tone-deaf businessmen that never come back to the district, and they don't pay attention to the real struggles that are going on in the 11th district. Thank you.
So in terms of this question, what kind of experience do I have? For me, I had the opportunity to take college classes in high school. I graduated from the Dean's List from Wheaton College, so I believe I have the acumen necessary to accomplish legislation in U.S. Congress. On top of that, obviously I'm a successful husband and father, and I think that's, other than following God, that's the most important thing that I could do. On top of that, I'm a business owner as well as a commercial property owner, as well as a teacher. So my small business, no one handed that to me. I didn't buy that from someone. No one gave that to me. I actually started that from scratch with a lot of competition. And from what I understand, we're one of the largest, if not the largest, music school in my city. On top of that, I'm a teacher. I have an understanding of what it's like to go ahead and communicate to people and accomplish something. In the end, being a small business owner for a longer period of time, it helps you just connected with the everyday way of life. My wife and I, we have budget conversations. We're actually having the conversations of how do we edit our budget just to make sure we can take care of rising inflation. And so I have the ability to represent people like you, the middle class, or even potentially those in the poor class, with everyday decisions that we're having to face. Thank you so much.
All right, so our next question is on the GOP Pillar for Law and Justice states that we believe every human life matters and the public's trust in the equal and sure application of law enforcement, civil order, and the rule of law is essential to a successful society. How do you balance the rights of citizens to petition the government for redress of grievances and provide a safe community? What needs to be done to restore the public's trust in law enforcement and to ensure that everybody feels that they have equal protection under the law? And this one starts with Mark.
first and foremost, I think we need to make crime illegal again. We have way too much crime happening in Cook County, and those criminals get picked up by law enforcement and they get let out the next day. Our problem is in this country is not with our law enforcement professionals. It's with our prosecutors and judges that refuse to keep people and put them in jail. Our law enforcement does the work every day that needs to get done. Just the other day in Naperville, there was a shooting. A law enforcement police officer did a routine traffic stop and ended up having to shoot a suspect that was charging them. We need to start with messaging from the top, from Congress. We need to stop demonizing our police and law enforcement. That's what we can do that makes a difference. I just talked to police officers the other day that said they don't want acknowledgement. They just want a little bit of appreciation. So we need to start showing them the appreciation that they deserve.
I fully believe that we need equal justice under the law. We need equal justice under the law. Doesn't matter your socioeconomic status. It doesn't matter your gender or race or anything else like that. What matters is that we get equal justice under the law. And so I firmly stand for that. I care very much about standing up against the defund the police movement. One of the most tragic things that has happened over the past 2 years has been the promulgation of the defund the police movement across America. You know, because of what happened, let's say, for instance, in Chicago in 2021, they cut their law enforcement budget by over $50 million. And subsequently, they then had their most deadly year in a quarter century. And the defund the police movement is uncompassionate. And so many people were made victims of crime because of the defund the police movement. So I would want to stand against that. I would want to make sure I stand against things like the Justice and Policing Act of 2021 that the Democrats have been trying to pass. I would care a lot about making sure we protect qualified immunity for officers because they have such a hard job. So all in all, we need to make sure crime is illegal, but again, stand up for law enforcement so we can protect people from being innocent victims. Thank you.
We really need to enforce our laws under the Constitution. We haven't done that. I went to the border 2 weeks ago because it really bothered me that in the 11th district, again, I take action candidate, I'm a candidate of the people. I wanted to see for myself what was going on. I talked to Border Control. I went to their headquarters. I sat down with Border Control and one of their special officers, and I asked, what is happening there and why are these drugs infiltrating our 11th district and how is this happening? And it's alarming, what I heard and how much this is affecting everyone in every suburb now and every city around the United States. It has infiltrated, so it is here. I believe in backing the blue 100%. I think that as far as the second part of the question, which I don't think we've answered, how do you balance the rights of the citizens to petition the government for redress? We have to protect the rights through the First Amendment to petition free, and that goes back to Constitution. But we really have to do that without violence. So as long as we do that, then when you talk about an insurrection, look at those 357 other insurrections that we had that were very violent with fires and gunshots and everything else. We have to really make sure that we do not do that again, and we enforce that.
All right, so our next question is on Congress's role to declare war. The U.S. Constitution states that Congress shall have the power to declare war, and the President is the commander-in-chief of our country's armed forces. The last time Congress deliberated and voted to declare war was in 1942 during World War II. If a new conflict were to arise involving an ally or treaty partner, do you think Congress needs to vote on any deployment of U.S. troops for any new war that arises in the future? Mark answered the last one first, right?
Yes. I think that's great. All right, sounds good. All right. So what I would say is I do believe in the Constitution, and the Constitution is clear when it comes to how we declare war as a nation, and so it needs to be up to the legislators. And I know we could have a very, very, very long and in-depth answer on this question, but I think it's very clear that the legislators, the Congress, needs to go ahead and be the one that gives final okay for a war. against any other nation for any other reason. You know, when the Constitution was formed, when we established our nation, we didn't establish it with legislators plus a king. We established it with 3 equal branches. And the legislators are in charge of declaring war. And so I would fully stand behind that we should in no way declare war unless the legislators are the ones that vote for that. Thank you.
I mentioned power grab before, and again, power grab. So yeah, we absolutely need to stand up for that right. The people need to speak. It should not be an executive order, an executive decision. The people need to speak. And yes, Congress needs to hear the people in their districts and in their states, find out what their opinions are, because when you declare war, there are so many things it touches. Okay, so we send these young and older servicemen into battle, and that's loss of life, and that's loss of family structure. So it's a very big decision. The people of the United States should have that decision-making power. It is also a probably multi-trillion dollar endeavor. So not only is it loss of life, it is budgeting, but it is our right to make that choice.
I very much believe in the separation of powers, and I believe that the Constitution is clear, as Jerry said. The legislature has the ultimate say to debate and declare war. However, the founders understood by separating that power with the president as the commander-in-chief that given today's speed with which conflicts arise, we need to give the executive branch enough energy to be able to respond to conflicts before they blow up into a war. So I do support the executive power to respond to conflicts. However, the ultimate decision-making has to be made by the legislature for a long, protracted war. And I think that that's how the separation of powers is supposed to work, is that you give the executive the speed with which to respond to conflicts globally, and the legislature's there to hold the executive accountable and to be the voice of the American people to decide whether or not we're going to send our soldiers into battle.
All right, so the First Amendment guarantees the freedom of speech. However, big tech companies such as Facebook, Twitter, Google, etc., control the social media and communication platforms that are used by most of our country's citizens. Conservative voices have been banned, canceled, suspended, and otherwise suppressed by the big tech companies. Section 230 of the 1996 Communications Decency Act says an interactive computer service can't be treated as a publisher or speaker of third-party content. In your opinion, have the big tech companies overstepped their bounds, and what legislative remedies do you think are needed?
The big tech companies have absolutely 1,000% overstepped their bounds. This radical, separation of and polarization of our land and our people because of the tech companies and their leftist views have really left our country in the situation that we are in today. So Section 203 really has to be really taken back and looked at, and we have to act. I have never been a fan of this since the very beginning, from the inception of how much power these companies actually have. In my opinion, they should be treated as utility companies now, because that's seriously what they are. If you think about the communication and the power over the people that they actually have and the power that they have become utilitarian and in some cases monopolies.
I believe absolutely that the big tech companies have overstepped and overreached their authority by censoring, banning speech. I believe we need to treat these companies like we do any other place of a public accommodation. We require anti-discrimination laws and we impose those type of laws in any place of public accommodation, in housing, in public places. we should treat these big tech companies the same way and impose First Amendment restrictions on them or protections for the people that use their platforms. The idea that a board can determine what's protected speech or what speech should be allowed on their platform is ludicrous. We all know that speech is protected under the First Amendment, except for fighting words in an immediate intent to inflict. I'm sorry, I lost my train of. But there's only certain levels of protected speech that that are not protected by the Constitution. Fighting words and I'm sorry, I'll get back to it. I'll think about it again. Thank you.
So big tech companies have absolutely gone beyond being platforms. They've gone into being publishers. I think what's become clear over the past number of years is we see big tech companies throttling specific users for conservative speech, or shadow banning specific users, or making it difficult for them to get their message out because of their speech, and that's been shown through a number of different sources as well as undercover interviews. And so because of that, because big tech is no longer serving as a platform but become focusing as being a publisher, those Section 230 protections should not be allowed for these big tech companies or for these social media companies. If a social media company or big tech company really actually wants to live as a platform, then that's great, but they're not doing that. And so what I want to say is I fully do believe in freedom of speech, but again, big tech and these social media companies are functioning as publishers, and they need to be held accountable as that. Thank you.
So this one, I'm lost. Yes. Yes. All right. So this one is: do you support term limits for members of Congress? And if so, what limitations would you support?
I do. I'm a firm believer in term limits. I believe that first and foremost, we need to reinvigorate the trust in our national government. The first step in doing that is to impose term limits. I believe that no more than 4 terms as a U.S. House representative is adequate to get your job done in Congress, and also it adds diversity and new ideas in cyclical areas. I also believe in 2 terms for a U.S. sitting senator. So I would support a constitutional amendment imposing term limits in those terms. Thank you.
I absolutely do believe in term limits. It is a elected representative's job to represent the people of their district in Washington, D.C. It's not their job to represent Washington, D.C. in their district. And so often we have career politicians who are in office for decade after decade after decade after decade. If a career politician who's been in office for 40 or 50 years was the answer, then why is Joe Biden kind of ruining the country? Asking for a friend. So we need term limits, absolutely. And I'm very, very much open to the discussion of making that happen. And I think it has to happen. And so I'm 100% behind those. And I think that legislators need to remember that so often if legislators are just hanging out in Washington, D.C. all the time, hanging out in their cliques, they lose connection with the everyday people who are just simply trying to pay their bills, put food on the table, create an educational opportunity for their children. So we need to make sure we get elected representatives who are just like everyday Americans, not like Washington elites. Thank you.
I signed the pledge for the term limits, which said that if I got to office, that I would support even my own term limits, and I'm 100% behind that. My daughter, my campaign manager, she witnessed the signature, and we sent it through because I think it is important. And the reason why it is so important is because you do have, once you get into politics for a while, there's more of a chance that you're going to be disconnected with your district and with the state. And I think that candidates like myself that run, for the right reasons and, from a grassroots perspective, we have the country and our state and our districts in mind, and we're caring for that district at the time. And not all of us, because I can tell you I'm very ethical and I don't believe that I would ever do this. But at times, we get called away from our district and we get more inclined to, be in the Washington circles.
So this next one, we'll start with Jerry. Section 3 of Article 4 of the Constitution says that new states may be admitted by the Congress into this union. Do you support adding Puerto Rico as a 51st state or altering the Constitution to allow for Washington, D.C. to become a state? Why or why not?
Yeah, so first off, like it was said, Washington, D.C., according to the Constitution, cannot become a state. I do not believe we should edit the Constitution for Washington, D.C. to become a state. On top of that, I do understand that over the course of decades and centuries, we have sometimes added states to our union. But one of the interesting factors that would often happen was legislators would find an opportunity so that there wasn't some sort of power grab by one party to go ahead and potentially look at sometimes even two states that would keep some sort of balance or equilibrium in terms of what was happening in our country. And so right now, at this time, in one sense, there's a constitutional openness for Puerto Rico to be added as a state, but at the same time, I would say I would like to go ahead and stick with the philosophy of making sure we can have potentially two at a time that would continue to keep some sort of balance so that we don't have a power grab by the Democrats to get in power in our nation. Thank you.
I'm a constitutionalist, and there is absolutely no way I would stand behind Washington, D.C. ever becoming a state. On the other side, I don't agree that Puerto Rico or any other territory should ever become a state, at least right now, because look at our country. I mean, we have to clean our own house. We have gas prices over $5. We've got chicken, that's gone up 75 or 100%. People can't, this really is affecting the lower income brackets. What about our veterans? We're not giving them the services that we need. We don't need another state. We don't need more entitlement programs. We really have to look at cleaning the house. I know that whoever gets into Congress in November will absolutely look at these kitchen table issues immediately, especially of course the Republicans that are running, but definitely we need to clean our own house first before we even think about doing anything else outside of our own nation.
This is a great constitutional question, and the only reason this issue has come up is because the Democrats want more power. So let's be real clear of what adding Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico is. It's a leftist takeover of the U.S. Senate. All of us up here agree, I would say, on 95% of the substantive issues, the pillars of the Republican Party. What differentiates me is that I'm really concerned about the procedural protections that have been attacked by the Democrats for 60 years, and they've managed to get their radical agenda passed by ideas like adding states, killing the filibuster, packing the Supreme Court. Every time they get in power, they talk about revising the Electoral College. All of those procedural protections, the founders understood. They put them in there specifically to protect us while we're in the minority. So adding the discussion of adding new states is just to give them 4 extra seats in the Senate. It's a power grab, and that's all it is.
So we are going to go off script a little bit, and we're going to split up this next question because there's just way too many things to answer in one little question. So, do you support the unequivocal enforcement of all federal immigration laws that are already on the books, and do you support the completion of a wall on the border between the U.S. and Mexico? And it'll be first to Susan. Jerry answered that last one first, so it'll be first to you.
The first part was about the laws on the books today. Well, absolutely. Absolutely. If we would enforce our laws that are on the books today, we wouldn't have almost 2 million people a year coming over our border illegally. And that's not fair for us, but it's not fair for them either. So we absolutely should not ever vary from that. Yes, I believe in building the rest of the wall. I think there should be the rest of the wall. If you take a look at every other country in the world. All of them have borders. There's a reason for that, and we do have to address additional, the enforcement of the laws, but then we really do have to look at why they are coming in. There should be immigration. I am a second generation immigrant to the United States, so we absolutely need to have immigration. We just need to do it by the books.
I'm a firm believer in the validity of the rule of law. So I believe that first and foremost, we need to enforce the laws that are on our books. But I think we also need to look at immigration comprehensively. For far too long, we've been ruling this country by executive order. And what we saw under President Trump is all of the executive orders that he put in place were gone on day one of the Biden administration. And we've seen this influx of illegal immigration ever since. So I support securing the border by building a wall where we can, and then everywhere else, you put boots on the ground and drone technology, and we've got to close up the porous border. And we need to get to a point where we eliminate sanctuary cities, we make them illegal at the federal level. And the only way to do that is legislatively, because President Trump tried to do it by executive order, and he was unsuccessful. Thank you.
So I absolutely believe in following the rule of law, especially when it comes to immigration law. Number one, we need to make sure the wall at the border is fully built every single area where Immigration and Customs Enforcement wants it to be built. Because not only is that the right thing to do in terms of immigration, but it's actually the compassionate thing to do. All the people that are dying because of drug overdoses or fentanyl overdoses, because drug cartels are becoming rich off of a lack of activity from the Joe Biden administration. The Joe Biden administration is MIA, and people are dying because of that. Sex trafficking victims are being created every single day because of the Joe Biden administration. So we need to finish the wall. I also care tremendously about things like E-Verify. We need to also end catch and release in this nation. It doesn't make any sense that someone comes over the border illegally and then they catch a few of them and then they give them a court date years down the road. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We need to end catch and release, and people need to be sent back if they cross the border illegally. Thank you so much.
All right, so the next question is also on immigration. The Constitution grants to Congress the responsibility to pass laws regarding the migration of persons to our country. The U.S. Constitution and federal laws are supposed to be the supreme law of the land. What do you propose to do as a member of Congress to deal with certain states and localities that pass laws to create sanctuary cities in defiance of federal law?
Here, again, I believe in comprehensive immigration reform. We need to get away from administrating by executive order. So Congress has to do its job. And we have to do something about the illegal immigrants coming over the border. We have to do something about the illegal immigrants that are here. And we have to do something about our immigration policy moving forward. How are we going to encourage immigrants to come to our country in a lawful, balanced manner? So we need to be able to work with Democrats, not the far left progressives. I'm talking. There are a number of Democrats that their voices have been silenced by the screaming, loud, radical, ridiculous Democrats on the far left. And with my experience as an attorney, I know how to walk across the aisle, roll up my sleeves, and work in an adversarial. And we need to solve immigration on a comprehensive basis.
Yeah, I think similarly to what was said before, sanctuary cities are simply not okay. They should be fully illegal. And I really believe that states and principalities and localities that are advocating for being a sanctuary city need to be prosecuted according to the law, because we should not be having that. And so I know I already mentioned some things in my previous answer, but I really care tremendously about things like E-Verify in terms of working, ending catch and release, but also making sure that we have a comprehensive immigration system so that those who come and try to be here legally have an actual real opportunity to come here legally, and they don't feel like they're being gypped because millions of people are coming across the border illegally. So we need to have a comprehensive system that works well for people. And so what I would say is, though, is that, again, we have to come back to the rule of law. I think we've come into a decade here where a lot of people want to focus more on their political whims than the rule of law when it comes to sanctuary cities. And I think we need to go ahead and make sure that sanctuary cities are not in existence, because it should be against everything regarding the Constitution and federal law. Thank you.
We absolutely have to eliminate sanctuary cities and states. Do you know that Illinois is one right now? I'm not sure if you guys know that. Yeah, it is. I think 2 nights ago was the gubernatorial debate in WGN, and Gary Rabine had mentioned that there was a scenario that he talked to law enforcement about where in Illinois there was a car of 9 individuals undocumented, and they couldn't do anything, right? So nothing was said. They had to let them go. And we're facing that right here, right now. So what is the reform for that? Well, again, it's multifaceted, and we definitely have to look for transformation, and we have to understand why and the reasons why immigrants are coming to the U.S. and really sort that out in a multitude of ways. I think first thing we should do is bring back the Stay in Mexico policy and other policies that will make sure that, at least for now, we have a handle on it.
The federal government's on-book debt, which excludes the present value obligation for benefits that have been promised, now exceeds $30 trillion, an amount in excess of $90,000 for every man, woman, and child in the country. If elected to Congress, will you put forward a balanced budget amendment, and what would be the key provisions of your proposal?
Yeah, so just being reminded of our federal debt right now is startling and shocking as I was just sitting there, being reminded of our over $30 trillion in debt that we have. That is absolutely uncompassionate, inhumane what our government is doing to our kids and grandkids and great-grandkids. We should not be shouldering the next generations with this type of debt. So first off, I would very much 100% support a constitutional amendment to balance the budget. I may have already mentioned it here, but I want to make sure that's very clear. And I think in terms of that constitutional balanced budget amendment, what I would say is that it really needs to be binding. It needs to really force the federal government, as well as the legislatures, as well as the executive branch, to have to find a way to make the budget work. Again, as a small business owner, I've mentioned, my background is that when you look at the bank account, you have what you have, and what you don't have, and you have to make tough decisions. And so long, legislators have been kicking the can down the road. We have to have a get it done now mentality, and that's what I'm going to bring to Congress. Thank you.
I'm a realist. When Ronald Reagan was president, he couldn't get past the balanced budget legislation or reform. So I'm just being a realist to say that I doubt that that's going to happen. However, I'm the best positioned of any of my opponents to really attack the problems that we have with the overspending in the federal government. So I mentioned a few ways I would do it. That would be to eliminate departments and programs that really have no business being in federal hands, and they should go back to the states. I also think that we should take a 10% cut to all departments across the board, and then really dig into some of the programs and some of the funding that is going on right now. I mentioned some of the $1.2 trillion that was using for infrastructure, and I'm finding out that actually that money isn't being used for infrastructure. So we really have to look at these things program by program.
I absolutely support a balanced budget amendment, and here's why. The problem is, for the last several years, we have funded our government through continuing resolutions. And what that is that's these big comprehensive mega bills that are in the hundreds of billions to trillions of dollars, Our government is supposed to be funded by September 30th of every year with, I believe, 13 appropriations bills. That hasn't happened in several years. And every time we do a continuing resolution where our hair is on fire and we're going to shut down the government, guess what? Billions of dollars of pork gets added. Everybody gets their pet project added, and that's why it blows up to be $1 trillion. And that's why we're $30 trillion in debt. So we've got to, number one, balanced budget amendment. Number two, we've got to actually pass the appropriations bills that are required so that we can eliminate the hair is on fire continuing resolutions.
All right, so this one we'll start with Susan. The U.S. Constitution states that the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. Do you support a federalization of our elections with one set of rules and procedures that must be used in every state? Or should our elections continue to be administered at the state and local level?
Well, I'm a federalist and I'm a constitutionalist, so I'm going to abide by the Constitution, and that's just not the way we do it. Do I like that we have different rules in states? Absolutely not. So I'm glad to see, though, that a lot of states are now changing their tune and really doing the things that should have been done long ago to ensure that people are U.S. citizens and that they are 18 years of age or older to vote as per the Constitution. So think about this. How easy would it be to just show your driver's license and vote at the polls? That isn't really a big deal. We have to show our driver's license for many things. I mean, for getting Walmart pickup or food pickup or, any trivial things less than the bigger and the more impactful voting right that we have.
I believe that fair and free elections are key to our republic. And I believe that the Constitution's clear, that state legislatures are directed to legislate the time and manner of our elections. What happened in 2020, let's be real clear, where secretaries of states, judges, state court judges, and state election boards that changed the law in the name of an emergency was unconstitutional. And they should have been declared unconstitutional, except we didn't have judges that had the fortitude to actually stand up for the Constitution. So as a U.S. congressman, I am not in favor of federalizing our elections, but elections don't happen in a vacuum. It's really important that we elect Republicans all the way down the ballot so that our elections are protected by our secretaries of state and by our county boards and our elected officials at the county level. Thank you.
So I firmly believe in the Constitution and in states' rights. I believe in states' rights to, of course, administer the times and places of elections. So I want to make sure I'm very clear that I do stand by the Constitution and states' rights. What I would say is that what has been happening recently in some states where we have this advent of ballot harvesting, which I believe is ripe for fraud. We have things where we don't seem to have voter ID happening in states where they should. I have major problems with that. And so what I would seek to do is, again, we have to understand that states have rights, but I would want to pursue every constitutional avenue where we could make sure we have secure elections and safe elections. So for the things that I would care about, just so you know my positions on things, is that I would want to ban ballot harvesting. I think ballot harvesting should not be happening. I care a lot about a photo ID requirement for voters. I care tremendously about making sure we're enforcing to have clean voter rolls. That's already in federal law, but it needs to happen. We need to have harsher penalties for states that don't do that. And so there's a number of things I could say. I'm out of time, but again, we need to have safe and secure elections and stand up for the rights of voters so that there's one person for every vote. Thank you.
All right, and then so this will be our final question before your closing statements. So our final question is, what question do you wish I had asked you today? Starts with you, Mark.
I wish you would have asked me what's my favorite thing about Illinois. So here it is. My favorite thing about Illinois is that it's home. There are a lot of people. I'm in the mortgage industry and I've done a lot of real estate closings. There are a lot of people that are packing up and leaving Illinois because they're fed up. They're fed up with our politicians, our politics. They're fed up with a system of government that overtaxes and overburdens them and it's completely hostile to business. So I'm the youngest of 9 kids, and I have 27 nieces and nephews, and every one of my brothers and sisters lives in Illinois. My mom lives in Illinois. My mom was one of 12 kids from a town in western Illinois, and we have a myriad of cousins in Amboy, Illinois. So here's my thing. We need to stay and fight. We need to stay and fight for Illinois because it's worth fighting for. We have the greatest city in the world 50 miles from here, and we need to clean up the corruption, clean up the politics, and fight for Illinois.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I think there's a number of questions I could think of, but one thing that I thought of first was actually in regards to an educational issue. I know we talked about education a little bit already in this forum, but one thing I would have loved to have talked about specifically is to hone in on indoctrination in terms of our young people. Right now, there's indoctrination happening nationwide, especially in our schools here in Illinois, having to do with critical race theory and having to do with other things having to do with gender theory when they're young, or having pornographic materials in their curriculum or in their libraries when they're young. And so I would have loved to even dive even more in how critical race theory is racist. It doesn't belong in our classrooms. You know, gender theory and all these really sick pornographic materials don't belong in our public school system or really anywhere. And so what I want to focus on and say is that we need to go ahead and stand up for a parent's right to decide how their children are educated, whether it's sex education or this education. Public schools should not be indoctrination facilities. They should be an opportunity for people to learn math and reading and geography. Thank you so much.
I think I would have liked to be asked, what do you do in the community to help? And as I said before, I'm an action candidate. I speak a lot. I love to talk, but I take a lot of action as well. So some of the things that I'm doing, and I'm an ombudsman for long-term care in Illinois Department of Aging. I am also working with St. Leonard's Ministry with their women program for homeless and battered women's shelter, and I'm teaching them life skills. And the biggest thing that I've done during my candidacy is that I've started a brand new 501(c) company, like I talked about before, feedourbabies.org, and it's gained a lot of traction. And I'll tell you, it's been humbling. I mean, to see that there's such a lack of formula in the 11th district and everywhere in the country. And the cries are heard because Joe Biden has done exactly what I have been rallying for, and that is to buy that baby formula over in trusted countries where it's great formula. And so thank you, everybody.
And now we will switch to 2-minute answers for this final question. This final question will just be an opportunity for you to give some closing remarks and let the people here in the 11th district know what it is that you want them to do to help you get elected to Congress. All right.
Yeah, so again, my name is Jerry Evans, and I just want to thank all of you out here in McHenry County for making this happen for us. I want to thank the tremendous candidates, Susan and Mark, for being a part of this. What I want to say is that I really believe that there are some tremendous and exemplary candidates on the ballot in this primary, and they deserve your full consideration. And I really respect my friends here on the stage as well as those who are in the primary. And what I would say is that, again, just to go ahead and give you background. So for me, I took college classes in high school. I was graduated from the Dean's List from Wheaton College. I did a lot of missionary work, went to India a number of times, in South Africa and Mexico, and helped train missionaries to serve other people, as well as I mentored young people. I've been a teacher for roughly 20 years, if not a little bit more, as well as a businessman. I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I really care tremendously about living a life of self-sacrifice, just the same way that Jesus did. Now, that's what I'm about. And so for me, I believe you heard my positions earlier, but what I want to say is just talk here in the end just about some viability. I know that This district is a district that did vote for J.B. Pritzker. It is a district that voted for Joe Biden, but I've got great news for you. It's become a nationally targeted swing district that we can pick up. And if you look at, if you look at other people who ran in different states, we found that there were swings that happened, by candidates who are conservatives. And so what I would say is, hey, I'm a pro-life Christian conservative. I really tremendously believe in our Constitution and conservative values, but I do believe I have the message necessary to go ahead and communicate with independents and communicate with soft Democrats to go ahead and win this district, because we will need independents. We will need soft Democrats to vote Republican to go ahead and win this district back. But on top of that, I've been endorsed by people like Jeannie Ives and Bob Thomas and Mike Bueller, and I've been successful on the fundraising front. We know that this is a big district. You need to raise funds in order to reach people. I've been successful on that front. And I would like to ask for your vote, because I really do believe that not only can I win this primary, but I have the ability to beat Bill Foster and bring conservative, Republican, everyday American values to U.S. Congress to fight for you. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
That's a really good question. We've not been asked this question before, and I can tell you that the three of us, I think we have some camaraderie here, because we're the only three that have shown up to any of these. We've done 3 of them now, and I'll tell you, these are not easy. We do speak for a living. I mean, I think you can tell that all 3 of us have some experience in it, but that doesn't mean we like it. And it doesn't mean I froze all day in this dress, just to let you know. And I really think that these are the kind of forums where we get the most out of it. And I wish that all the candidates could be here, because as we talk to voters, we understand what's on your minds. Every time I talk to voters, I realize that I need to learn more. I need to understand more. I need to dig in more. And I start reading all kinds of articles, and I start thinking about all types of ways that I can affect the nation when I get to Congress. What I can ask you to do, all of you, is to please do what I'm doing, and that is step up to the plate. It is scary. I mean, you hear all these terrible things like, oh, they're going to look into your backgrounds, they're going to look into your financials, and that may all happen. But all of us have our fallibilities. All of us come from God. We're not perfect, but we need to step up. We need to step up as Republicans. We need to step up as good people. And we need to say, we're going to run and we're going to make a difference. Because if we don't stand up now, our nation is going to take a turn for the worse. And we don't want that. We want to have this incredible, incredible culture that we have in the Midwest, like no other place in the world. We have great values. We've got great kids. We do have great schools. They're turning now. So step up and do something and really be a part of that change. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your attention and for being here today. Thank you, McHenry County, for allowing all of us to come and speak. My name is Mark Carroll, and I'm running for the 11th District, and I'm asking for your vote because of my skills, background, and experience, I think make me uniquely positioned to be able not only to win the primary, but to beat Bill Foster and to represent you in Washington on day one. I'm the youngest of 9 kids. I've said that several times. I'm a Hillsdale College graduate where I learned the proper scope of the Constitution and the size and scope of the federal government. I'm a practicing attorney for 20 years where I've had to represent people, and people come into my office and they leave trust funds that I have to put in a trust fund, and I hold that money. It's not mine, it's theirs, and I hold it as a sacred trust. When I'm elected, just as I have done as an elected trustee in North Aurora, the power that's given to me is your power. I will hold it as a sacred trust. I've been up and down this district, and just for a little bit of color, it's 8 counties, and it's about 750,000 people. And what I've heard is that people are fed up with the same old routine where we elect millionaire, tone-deaf politicians that have no connection to the people they represent. They're self-serving and selfish, and we need to elect people that are selfless and that understand that the concerns and needs of you should be put in front of my concerns and my needs. And that's why I'm here today. I am fed up with our current system where we have these lifetime politicians. That's why I'm a firm supporter in term limits. I believe in a constitutional amendment that applies that every act of Congress has to apply equally to every member of Congress, every federal worker, and every executive employee. So I'm asking for your vote. I'm last on the ballot. CARROLL, as my dad always said. Thank you, and God bless you.
All right. I want to thank all the candidates for coming out here today. Thank you for coming and meeting with the voters of the 11th District. Thank you for stepping up to run. We need good people on the ballot. If we don't have good people on the ballot in the primary, we don't have good people on the primary and the ballot in the general. We have to take this district, and I want to thank you guys for all your hard work. Give them a round of applause. Thank you.